Have you ever wondered why a man remembers her most? Not in the daylight, not in the noise, not in the arms of someone new, but after midnight? It's always after midnight, when the world quiets down and the masks start to slip, when the distractions no longer distract, when the ego is tired and the soul begins to whisper. That's when she returns. Not in body, but in energy, in a flicker, in a breath, in a memory that hits like a storm and disappears like smoke. He told himself he was over her, that she was too much, that he had moved on. But time has a strange way of bending back toward what was real, and the soul remembers what the ego tries to bury. Because she wasn't just another woman, she was the one who saw him. She didn't need to scream to be unforgettable. She didn't need to beg to be remembered. She simply showed up fully, loved deeply, and left quietly when her spirit was no longer being met. And that silence, it haunts him now. Especially after midnight, when there's nowhere left to run. No meetings, no noise. Just the sound of his own heartbeat echoing with questions he once refused to ask. Why didn't he fight for her? Why did he push her away when all she wanted was connection, truth, and presence? The answer is not simple, because this is not about romance. It's about awakening. And Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, knew this secret well. He spoke of soul echoes, of energy that lingers far beyond touch, of karmic encounters dressed in ordinary skin, of the feminine force that arrives not to stay, but to shake the illusion out of a man's life. Listen. This woman was that force. Not because she was loud, but because she was real. She showed him love that asked for nothing but his presence, and that terrified him more than any demand ever could. You see, most men are not afraid of love. They're afraid of the version of themselves they would need to become in order to receive it. She didn't want his performance, she wanted his truth. But truth is messy. Truth means dropping the act, meeting the shadow, owning the pain, facing the fear of not being enough, of being seen too clearly, of being asked to rise into a manhood the world never prepared him for. So he deflected, he distanced, he diminished her. Not because she wasn't worthy, but because her presence made him feel unworthy. And now, after midnight, he feels her again. Not through pictures or posts or ghosted messages. He feels her in the gap between who he is and who he could have been. That's what keeps him awake. Not regret for losing her, but regret for betraying himself. Because she didn't try to fix him. She simply offered her energy, her wisdom, her stillness. She gave him a glimpse of what it feels like to be truly loved, not for his mask, but for his essence. And when he couldn't hold it, she let him go, not in anger, but in truth. She didn't close the door loudly. She left it slightly ajar, letting him know, when you're ready, not for me, but for you, you'll understand. And now he does. He sees her in the calm confidence of women who aren't performing. He hears her in the silence after casual encounters. He feels her in his chest when the night drapes over him like a mirror. She was his mirror, his reflection, his sacred threshold. He remembers the way she listened, not to respond, but to witness. The way her body carried softness and strength all at once. The way her eyes said, "I see who you are beneath the armor," and that's what he regrets most. Not that she left, but that he wasn't man enough to stay with himself long enough to rise into the man who could meet her there. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a soul rupture. She was the lesson he didn't want, the initiation he refused. But midnight doesn't lie. It strips the mind bare and lets the soul speak. And the soul says this: she was never the one who got away. She was the one who showed up when I didn't. Now, her memory is no longer a wound, it's a reminder. A quiet prophecy from a woman who left with dignity and took nothing but the energy that once held him together. Because sometimes the ones who walk away don't break us. They awaken us. And after midnight, that truth becomes impossible to ignore. He scrolls through his life now like a man skimming past the pages of a book he never finished reading. And every woman he meets, every fleeting connection, every night spent trying to forget, only brings her closer. Not in flesh, but in contrast. Because none of them mirror him the way she did. None of them hold silence the way she did. None of them disarm him with presence rather than performance. It wasn't just what she gave him, it was what she withheld. She withheld control. She withheld manipulation. She withheld the need to be needed. She didn't want to own him. She wanted him to own himself. And that, more than anything, is what he now realizes after midnight, that the love she gave was never conditional. It wasn't weaponized. It wasn't performative. It was pure, terrifyingly so. Because purity demands truth, and truth was something he wasn't ready to face. He remembers the way she looked at him, not with desire, but with knowing, as if she had seen his soul in another life and came back to remind him of what he forgot. But he wasn't ready. He confused her calm with indifference, her silence with disinterest, her strength with detachment. He told himself she didn't care. But now he knows. She cared more deeply than anyone ever had. And precisely because she cared, she couldn't stay. She couldn't sit there and pretend not to feel the disconnection growing in his words. She couldn't keep offering herself to a man who was still hiding behind his own emptiness. She had done that before, in other lifetimes, in other loves, in other heartbreaks, but not this time. This time she left so she could live, and the moment she left, his awakening began. Not immediately, not loudly, but subtly, in pieces, in waves. He started noticing the way his chest tightened at the thought of her, the way certain songs sounded like confessions, the way her name floated to the surface of his thoughts, uninvited, unforgotten. And when the world sleeps, and the masks are off, and his inner noise fades into silence, she speaks again, not in words, in vibration, the vibration of a woman who was real. And that's what his soul regrets, that he didn't know how rare she was when she stood in front of him, that he dismissed her softness as weakness, her mystery as moodiness, her depth as danger. But now he knows, dangerous women aren't the loud ones. They're the ones who see you, stay quiet, and walk away with their dignity intact. Because feminine power doesn't yell. It haunts. And Cayce understood this. He spoke of soul ties, energy entanglements, emotional contracts forged long before this life began. He knew that not every woman a man loses was ever his to keep. Some arrive not to stay, but to disrupt, to awaken, to tear the veil between who he thinks he is and who he was born to be. She was that disruption, the earthquake beneath his ego, the mirror he shattered because he couldn't bear what he saw. And yet he misses her, not out of nostalgia, out of recognition. He now recognizes what he couldn't name then, that she was home. Not a place, not a possession, but a vibration. The kind that settles your nervous system and sparks your spirit in the same breath. He regrets her the most, not because she punished him, but because she didn't. Because she let him go with grace. Because she never made him feel small. She made him feel seen, and that's what scared him. Now he chases things that don't matter. Fame, status, bodies without presence. But nothing fills the gap. Because the gap isn't where she used to be. It's where he used to be with her. The version of him that was almost ready, almost present, almost whole. But almost is where regret lives. And after midnight, that regret blooms like a flower that only opens in the dark. She doesn't hate him. She never did. She simply understood what he didn't, that love without awareness is just longing. That desire without growth is just delay. That you cannot meet a woman in her fullness while hiding from your own. So she chose herself. not loudly, but fully. And in doing so, she became unforgettable. She doesn't appear in his life anymore, not in texts, not in unexpected phone calls, not even in the corner of the same social circles. She's disappeared in the way only a woman who has reclaimed her soul can, completely. And yet, he feels her, not as a memory, but as a presence, not as a person, but as a principle. The principle of truth, the echo of emotional depth, the reminder of what love looks like when it's rooted in self-knowledge and spiritual power. She lives now as an ache beneath his confidence, a whisper behind his victories, a silence behind every shallow "I love you" he utters to women who don't know the weight of his wounds. Because she did. She knew. Not because he told her, but because she felt it. Felt the fracture behind his smile. Felt the panic hiding beneath his cool detachment. Felt the boy who never learned that being vulnerable wouldn't kill him, it would set him free. She never judged it. She loved him in it. But she wouldn't sacrifice herself to save him from himself. And so, she left. But she left with nothing. No drama. No explanation. No final monologue. Just the power of silence. And that silence now screams in him louder than any words could. Especially after midnight. When his soul is too tired to lie. When all the faces blur. When all the games feel empty. That's when he remembers her most. Not for how she made him feel, but for how she made him see. She held up a mirror to everything he buried. To the ways he avoided. To the love he withheld. To the parts of himself he still hasn't claimed. She was not easy. She was evolution, and he resented her for it. At first, because it's easier to blame the woman who walked away than to ask why you didn't rise to keep her close. But over time, the anger faded, and the regret remained. Because he knows now, she was the threshold. The line between who he was and who he could have become. But you can't cross a threshold if you're still holding the weight of ego. He thought she would come back. They always did. They always begged, always checked in, always reminded him that he was wanted. But not her. She disappeared like a woman who knew her value wasn't up for negotiation. And that's what kills him. Not that she left, but that she never had to look back. Because feminine energy in its highest form doesn't cling. It chooses. She chose him once, but when it was clear that he hadn't chosen himself, she stepped back. Not out of punishment, but out of respect for her own spirit. And now, when the parties end, when the dopamine crashes, when the accolades fade into silence, he lies awake. Not lonely, empty. Because he's surrounded but untouched. Desired but unseen. Successful but unfulfilled. And she, the one who left with grace, becomes the only presence that feels real. He remembers the way she breathed in the room. The way her stillness demanded truth. The way her boundaries were quiet but unshakable. And above all, the way she left with love still in her eyes. That's what cut the deepest. She didn't run from him. She released him. Like a woman who understood that not all love stories are meant to be completed. Some are meant to awaken. He will never again feel a love like hers. Not because he can't be loved again, but because he will never again be loved that blindly. She loved him before he was ready. Before he rose. Before he became. And now, even if they were to meet again, she wouldn't recognize the version of herself who once waited, once softened, once hoped. Because that version is gone. And in her place stands a woman reborn. Untouched by the need to explain. Unmoved by the ghosts of almost. Unreachable by the man who only shows up after midnight. And so he lies there. Not broken, but aware. Aware that the one who got away was never his to begin with. She was his invitation, and he declined. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses,